在线的所有的朋友们，大家晚上好！欢迎大家参加我们今天晚上的讲座。我们今天晚上讲座的内容呢是，这个年末的时候给大家做一个总结，关于不管是遗产规划方面、遗产税方面、慈善规划以及一些end of year 有哪些 tax planning 的一些 techniques，以及这个一些具体的一些问题啊，我们今天的讲座里面，这个会跟大家 cover。首先就是说，今天讲座，我可能就是上半段会和大家多聊一下，因为我下半段的时候我有另外一个讲座，就是我要去参加，所以可能前半段我们讲 estate planning、estate tax 这个部分呢，我会主讲。那后半段呢，关于 year end 的这个planning tax planning 有哪些 tax planning 的 tips，以及一些 charitable planning 的方面的一些一些问题，那主要要由这个 Michael Lee 律师跟大家来去讲一下。那在今天讲座之前呢，我先还是老规矩啊，自我介绍一下，我是 RUI Attorneys 瑞成律师事务所的李小薇律师，我主要呢精专的就是遗产信托规划这方面。那另外一位律师呢是大家的老朋友 Michael Lee 律师，Michael Lee 律师呢是税务律师，他的很多的客户呢是湾区的一些高资产净值的家庭和人士，他主要精专的是遗产税以及收入税方面的规划。那我们也请 Michael Lee 律师跟大家打一个招呼。
Greetings all. It's good to see you. I think our last webinar of 2024 and before the holidays. So glad you could join us. So we'll be rounding out the year with a few tips and thoughts. And then after that, wish you a happy holiday and see you in 2025.
是我们特别感谢，就是这一年以来，所有的朋友们参加我们的讲座，我知道，就是有的朋友，我们的12场讲座基本上是一场都不落，每个月都是在固定的周三或者周四的时间来参加我们的讲座，所以特别感谢大家啊，这个对我们的支持，也希望我和 Michael Lee 律师我们两个人跟大家的分享对大家有一定的用处，然后你也可以把这些知识分享给你的身边的朋友和亲戚们。嗯，那另外一个在讲座之前，我们一定要讲的一件事情，就是说我们事务所做讲座的目的呢，实际上就是为了普法和教育的目的。如果说呢您有任何的具体的问题呢，还是要具体的跟我们去做一个咨询。如果你需要任何的 legal advice 的话呢，只能是这样1对1的咨询。我们的讲座呢不能作为一个 legal advice 的一个作用啊。您咨询的话可以 either 给我们发短信、email，或者说是给我们打电话。我们的联系方式呢都在我们的 slides 的最下面，您都可以看到。好，那without further ado，我们现在就开始进入到我们的正题啊。首先，我们来这个简单的讲一下关于 estate planning。因为我觉得就是我们的客户里面包括很多的听众，可能大家都处在不同的一个生活的 stage。有的客户的话可能比较年轻，然后从来都没有做过信托，对信托也没有了解。但是也有很多的客户，可能这已经是他们做的第2版、第3版，甚至这个修改过很多次的信托了。那也有的客户是属于这个处在可能已经退休，然后是高资产净值的人士，可能需要一些 state tax 的一些planning 的 tips。那基本上所有的客户都可以从我们的讲座当中 benefit，就是我们会去讲说为什么如果你即使是很年轻，你只有一套房子，你也需要讲座。为什么你有很多的资产，你更需要去做这个信托遗产规划？那首先呢，就是在加州呢，这个大家都知道，我们在加州生活有2个法律，就是在家庭方面，我觉得就是大家必须要知道的。第一个就是大家耳熟能详的 community property law，就是夫妻共同财产制。你一旦结婚了之后，有一些你通过劳动所得的资产，基本上都算是夫妻共同的资产所以你的工资你以为是你自己的个人的资产，存进你的个人的账户，但是如果是离婚的话，你会发现并不是那么一回事儿。法院会认为说这个资产是你们夫妻2个人的共同的资产。 那另外一个从遗产继承的角度来讲的话，就是你一定要做的就是信托。为什么要一定做信托呢？是因为在加州我们有一个法庭的程序叫做 probate，或者说另外的一个相对应的程序 conservatorship。conservatorship 是如果你失去意识行为能力的话，你的资产要经过法庭的我们的中文叫监护人程序。probate 就是如果你过世的话，你的资产要经过法庭的遗产认证程序。那这两个程序呢，除了这个它是一个 public 的procedure，你的所有的私人的信息都会成为法庭的 record 公布于众。那更重要的是，它是有比较昂贵的法庭的费用所以在加州，如果说你有一定的资产，这个一定呢，基本上按照法条的规定是大概18万左右的以上的资产呢，你都需要去做的是一个信托。那通过简单的一个可撤销生前信托，你就可以规避我刚才讲的这两个法庭程序。这也就是为什么就是这个包括有一些新搬来加州的一些朋友都会听到身边的朋友讲说，我一定要做信托。包括有一些新移民的朋友也听过说你要做信托。这个 essentially 就是 why 在加州我们一定要做信托的一个原因，就是因为本身的法庭的程序。那美国我们知道是有这个不同的州的，不是就是不同的州的法律那是不一样的，它不是一个就是这个所有的都是由中央从就是 central federal government 联邦来去下达的一个法律，每一个州都会有自己不同的法律。那有一些领域呢，你比如说像知识产权，像这个联邦税法，这个是很典型的联邦法律，但是在遗产财产继承的这方面，基本上它都是州法，所以不同的州会有不同的规定。那加州是这样的规定，大部分就是西海岸的州也是有类似的规定，但是东海岸有个别的州可能会有一些不同。这个就是如果你在其他州的话，如果有资产或者是其他州的居民，您可以找当地的律师去进行咨询。我们做的主要的客户呢，其实是西海岸的，像加州、华盛顿州，这样的客户。当然，如果说你在东部哪一个州如果有房产之类的资产的话，这个在我们信托做完之后，你可以再联系当地的律师，把你在那个州的资产再转到你的这个信托里面，这个也都是可以的啊。这就是一些信托比较细节的一些问题了。那另外呢，就是做信托，我们其实最主要的问题就是今天，因为这个年终岁尾也要讲的是，就是其实为什么要做信托？很重要的一个原因就是你不希望你如果失去意识行为能力或者过世的时候，你的家庭是不和谐的。那如果说你在你的意识清醒的时候，你可以把很多的条款制定好。甚至是说，就是把你背后的，有的时候在有一些特定情况下，你可以把你背后这么做的一个原因给讲清楚的话，其实是可以促进家庭的一个和谐，而不会说在你，比如说过世之后，然后会发生家庭成员之间的一些误解，比如说妈妈为什么把这个房子给哥哥没有给弟弟，妈妈会为什么会做这样的一个划分？所以其实遗产财产方面，领域，就是它有的时候不简单的就是一个划分，就写在纸上的一个数字。其实更多的就是从我和 Michael 律师我们两个人角度来讲，我们是作为客户的倾听者，帮你去怎么去避免，尽量少的避免家庭的矛盾。然后如果说发生了这个一不幸的事情之后的话，至少你的资产不需要经过复杂的法律程序，然后你的资产消耗在这些程序当中，然后同时呢，你的家庭又可以非常和谐，不破坏大家的这个关系啊。然后另外一个就是说呢，遗产信托的话也有保护家庭资产的作用。比如说有一些小孩，他可能就是没有管理资产的能力他可能就是不是特别会去 manage 自己的 finances。或者有一些家庭，像我们经常会做的，就是有一些 special needs 的需求，特殊需要的小孩需求。那这个时候，信托呢是唯一的一个方法，你可以去既 给你的小孩提供一个保障，然后同时呢，也不让你的家庭的资产消耗在这个浪费上面，或者说就被债权人拿走。甚至是有的时候，我们常见的一个诉求是，有很多人担心，就是如果小孩离婚的话，可能他小孩和他的配偶关系不好，那他如果给小孩的资产，他担心，小孩和他的个人资产，和他现在这个婚姻期间的一些资产，混在一起之后，然后就被他的配偶所分割。那其实，通过信托来完成继承，把资产保留在信托里面，也同时可以就是起到，呃，让家庭的资产可以得到保护的这样的一个作用啊。但另外最重要的一个，有一些类型的信托是有可以帮客户起到节约税务的一些作用。那个这个晚一些的时候，Michael Lee 律师也会给大家具体的介绍。但是其实有的时候一些简单的可撤销生前信托的条款也可以帮客户就是节省税务。那尤其是如果说你不是美国的公民，而是只是美国的绿卡，那你在信托当中去设定相应的条款，其实是非常重要的。因为虽然从大的方向来讲的话，美国绿卡持有者和美国公民都是享有较高的遗产税的免税额，但是从细节的角度来讲的话，要分就是夫妻之间，尤其是夫妻之间的话，是不是有无限制的免税额？因为我们知道美国公民配偶之间是有无限制的免税额的，但是如果是绿卡夫妻之间，或者夫妻双方有一方是绿卡的话，这个法律就会有所改变。但是在信托里面，我们提前去做一些设置，这个其实是会对你的资产这方面会有一定的这个保障的啊。呃，接下来就讲一下这个遗产，当然很多人都已经知道了，就是遗产规划的主要的文件的话，就是主要有4个，最基本的是可撤销生前信托，然后是遗嘱，授权书，然后是
Yeah.
Advanced Healthcare Directive，
Can
医
I
疗治
jump
疗的
in?
生前提示。Yeah, of course, go ahead.
Oh, could we go back to the other slide just quick? I just have a one point to add is goals of estate planning. And it's something actually I really like to underline with clients because it sometimes we get lost in the design, we get lost in a lot of the ideas, but we want to maintain a focus on the goals of estate planning. And 4 things that Xiaowei mentioned. One is, avoid probate. What do we mean? Avoid court trouble. We don't want court stuff, number one. Number two is to promote streamlined distribution efficiency. We want efficiency. And then number two, we want to say, or number three, preserve family wealth, save money. We don't want to waste on paying for things that we don't need to pay for. And then number four is some things there's no way to avoid it. We have to pay taxes. We want to save taxes. So we have 4 goals. Avoid court, be efficient, save money, save taxes. And save money, save taxes are kind of 2 different things. And remember with the goals is that these things are not always in the same direction. So increasing efficiency and avoiding court, that goes in the same way, as we'll see how to design the estate plan in a solid way. Preserve family wealth, also efficient, and how these things go different ways. A lot of people say, well, I want efficiency, I want to avoid court. And then they say, well, but then I'm going to create a very, very complicated trust with I want the trust administration to not disperse to my children, even if they're over 40 years old. I want to have the trustee dole out $5,000 a month every month until my kids are each 75 years old. Okay, well, we've avoided court. We have a distribution that's somewhat efficient, somewhat clear, but then preserve family wealth. I mean, we're preserving it from the sense that we're not handing it over, but that's going to cause a lot of administrative expense. So it's balancing. So for a lot of this thinking about goals of estate planning, the same way save taxes, we can create interlocking trusts of irrevocable defective grantor trust, IDGT, and then GRAT, and then we could have the CRT pours back to the person and then goes to do all these things. We can try to lower the taxes down quite a bit, but we're sacrificing maybe some preservation of family wealth, we're saving the taxes, but can we keep administrative costs low enough that it's worth it? Can we keep efficiency efficient that it's worth it? So these things are actually all in play when we go forward for the goals of planning. So great, let's move on to the instruments.
美婷，我觉得我们就可以直接到下一个 slide。对，所以这个 slide 其实就是给大家讲一下，就是这个通过一个图表啊，你就可以看到什么是信托，就最直接的去理解，然后以及信托最重要的一些角色。信托你就可以把它想成，我们经常跟客户讲说，你就可以把它想成一个 box，一个盒子或者是一个桶啊。然后这个你可以在这个盒子或者这个桶里面，可以把你的所有的资产都放进去。下一个 slide 我们会跟大家讲有哪些资产可以放进去。但是你就可以把它想成是一个容器，然后你把你的资产放进去。那在这个容器里面，你去制定你的规则，然后比如说谁来管理你的资产，谁来在你的资产下如何去受益。那所以在这个信托下最重要的其实有几个人，一个是 settler， 就是信托建立人，然后另外一个 trustee， 就是中文我们叫受托人，或者美国我们常说就是管理人，然后另外一个就是 beneficiary 受益人。那最常见的这种 revocable living trust 可撤销生前信托，实际上在建立之初呢，你自己既是信托的建立人，又是信托的管理人，又是信托的受益人。但是你可以在你的信托当中指定 successor trust， 就是续位的信托管理人。那这个人呢，主要是如果你失去意识行为能力的话，你无法去管理你的信托，或者你过世的话，带你去管理信托。然后另外一个就是受益人，受益人的话就是 obviously 根据这个名词，它的意思就是谁来在信托下去受益。那你当然可以在这个信托里面去制定规则，如何去受益啊。那还有一个我们最常见的客户问的一个问题，就是说为什么我要去做信托而不是一个遗嘱？因为像很多大陆背景的客户的话，他都会觉得说，在大陆，因为至今为止，大陆主要的遗产传承的工具还是遗嘱，哪怕是一个上市公司的股份，很多人也是通过遗嘱来去传承。我就是亲眼有看到过这个我们的客户里面，上市公司的股份竟然用一个这个手写的遗嘱来去传承，这个也是有的。但这个一方面可能就是是因为客户本身这个他没有去有这个做特别周全的、全面的一些考量和提前的规划。但是也有一个原因，就是说在大陆包括手写遗嘱、公证遗嘱，遗嘱还是主要的去做资产传承的一个主要的工具。但是在加州呢和美国的大部分的州，如果说你只有遗嘱没有信托，一个最大的问题就是在遗嘱，就是你只有遗嘱的情况下，你要把遗嘱 submit 给法院。然后，所以你还是要经过我们刚才讲的法院的 probate 遗产认证程序，它不能去规避遗产认证程序，然后不能去帮你去就是节省你的费用，然后同时你的所有的资产、家庭结构这些都会暴露在公众之下，就不会成为一个 private 的一个事情。所以 will 不能解决根本的问题，只有 trust 它可以达到我们在 estate planning 想要达到的我刚才讲的这些结果。同时，就是这个再回到我们讲的 trust 的很多的目的，就是实际上是你希望给你的后代提供一些，尤其是像我讲的，有一些继承人可能他不是特别就是善于去经营自己的财产。就是他花钱可以，但是管钱他不可以。还有就是说这个资产保护给这些作用，遗嘱都是没有办法去提供的，只有信托才可以提供。所以大家一定要考虑的是，不能就是当代的话，我们没有说一般只做一个遗嘱，一般都是遗嘱和信托相配合。那为什么也要做遗嘱呢？就是遗嘱里面一个是 cover 说，如果有一些资产，我们可以看下一个 slide。有一些资产的话，可能我们没有办法放到信托里面，或者我们忘记了放到信托里面的话，那遗嘱至少起到了一个我们叫像一个网兜的一个作用，可以去 cover。那另外呢，就是遗嘱里面你可以指定小孩的监护人，像我们有很多客户，他们其实 做遗产规划的一个最主要的动因就是小孩是未成年人。那他希望说，假设如果小孩在成年之前发生什么事情，他的小孩可以得到妥善的照顾。像我们都是父母嘛，我们都是这个希望小孩可以得到最好的照顾。那所以呢，在 will 里面呢，你是可以指定小孩的监护人的。刚才就是提到了说，在信托里面，我们会把各种的资产放到信托里面。那最常见的呢，放到信托里面的资产，一般是你的像银行，呃，回到上一个 slide，一般是像股票啊、现金啊之类的资产，都是常见的可以放到信托里的资产。但是这里面就特别会提到有几个资产，可能我们在就是在做的时候会有一些不同。就是最后这三个我们列的 life insurance、retirement account 和 cryptocurrency。人寿保险的话，等一下我们可以再具体跟大家讲，就是会有专门的，如果你买大额的人寿保险，有专门的人寿保险信托。但是一般来讲，如果一般的保险，你比如说，term 的，或者说，你的是 whole life 或者是 IUL、VUL 这一些类型的保险，但是可能没有那么大的金额，比如说50万、25万这样的金额，那可能就没有必要去单独的去做一个人寿保险信托。但是人寿保险本身又不能直接放到信托里面，那可能你就要考虑，比如说人寿保险的受益人可以写成信托。retirement account 退休账户也是同样，因为它本身有一些这个税务的要求哈，联邦税法的一些要求，所以也是不可以直接放入信托的。还有就是 crypto currency，这个因为最近像比特币，像其他的一些就是以太币各种这个crypto 涨得比较厉害，也是一个很热门的一类资产了。那这一类资产呢，一般来讲也没有办法直接放到信托里面。那它需要去 require 一些特殊的一些 planning 的方式。这里面特别要提到的就是说，有很多包括像比如说 Robinhood 这样的一些 brokerage，它其实是允许你可以持有 cryptocurrency，但是你如果仔细去研读它关于 cryptocurrency 的一些遗产财产继承方面的法律的话，你会发现它和一般的 brokerage 是非常不一样的。比如说一般的 brokerage 的话，大部分的 brokerage 是允许你可以，比如说以 trust 的形式持有，然后或者是指定 beneficiary 是 trust 的。但是，crypto 的话，很多情况下，很多 brokerage 是不允许的，即使这个 brokerage 它会 trade crypto。是一个 platform 可以 trade，但是不可以。它有一些像它的要求会非常苛刻。它就是说，如果假设 something happened to you，那这个 crypto 的 currency 会被变卖，变卖了之后要经过法庭的 probate 的程序，遗产认证的程序。这个是就是目前他们正在想有没有其他的方法可以就是不用这种方法，但是目前呢，按照 current law 的话，他们会用这样的方法。所以这里面就特别提到，就是如果说我们的客户里面有 crypto 的 currency，你就要注意，因为这个是一个正在 develop 的一个部分的法律，所以可能按照目前的很多规定来讲的话，其实对我们 planning 来说是不是说一个最 ideal 的一个状态？但是这个就是你的 trade off。如果说你觉得你愿意用这个 platform 去进行 trade，但是他不给你提供，就是相应你必须就是要会有这个 probate 的问题啊什么的，这个就是你自己，我觉得就是你 make 一个 informed decision，你要这么样做的话，那我觉得也 OK，或者你就把它 transfer 到其他的一些 platform 上面，可能它会有一些更好的 arrangement。所以这里面就跟大家提一下，我之所以就是这个地方讲一下，就是因为我们现在好多客户都会有这方面的一个 asset holding，然后这个是大家比较 confused 或者没有注意的问题。那下一个呢，我就会讲一下关于real estate 的 holding。如果说就我能给大家一个意见的话，就是如果说你持有房产，你不要在没有律师的建议这个没有咨询律师的情况下，把小孩的名字加到房产上面，或者说在没有和律师咨询的情况下，然后把你的房子给小孩，因为这样的话真的是会有很大的一个问题的。首先就是首当其冲的就是你的地税可能会 改变。这个我们以前讲座跟大家讲过很多次了。然后另外一个就是你的小孩在房子的 title 上面，那他如果有 creditor，甚至是如果说他本身在离婚的程序上，那你可能你的这个房产都会 at risk。然后另外一个就是说，这个房子在你去世的时候，如果说你通过信托的形式你给他的话，会有这个 startup basis，它的税基会增加。那你就是如果小孩你在卖房的话，就没有那么多的税要缴。但是如果说你提前把他的名字加上或提前给他的话，你就会这个可能就没有了。所以这个你就是一个家庭的，你一定要 plan 好。还有就是可能很多人没想到的，就是上次我讲座我没有跟大家提的，就是其实这个就涉及到一个也涉及到一个 gifting 的一个问题。你想，你把你的一个比如说200万的房子给你的小孩，实际上是相当于你赠与给他两百万。你赠与给他200万的话，每年每人只可以免税的赠与给一个人18000，超过18000的部分的话，都要算到你的终身的免税额里面。然后相当于你比如说200万的话，你就在没有做提前规划的情况下，你把你的200万的这个终身免税额给用了。用了之后的话，你在过世的时候，你这个额度就会降低。当然就是有一些人会用它去做一个这个我们叫 gifting strategy，那就是另一种说法，因为你是有 plan 的去做这个事情，可能 in stages 你去用终身免税额，但是你在毫不知情的情况下，然后就把这个终身免税额给用到，那其实也会就是也会造成一些这个家庭财产的在这个过程当中的一个损失啊。所以这个我们就提醒大家的是，不要在没有任何的法律意见的情况下，就把小孩的名字加到房子上。这个我见过太多的这个案例了。Michael, do you have anything to add on this or the PowerPoint before?
No, I think this looks great.
OK, sounds good. Yeah，那我们就最后我这个部分的话，我再 move on to 给大家讲一下这个关于遗产税的部分，然后我就呃把这个演讲的权利交给 Michael 啊。这遗产税现在也是一个比较 common 的话题，尤其是11月份大选之后，大家都在探讨说这遗产税到底何去何从。首先介绍一下现在的情况吧。根据目前的情况的话，就是一个人个人的这个遗产税的免税额是13.6个 million， 1360万啊，1361万，这个就大概是我这个额度。然后如果其实夫妻两个人的话，就大概2700万左右。那如果说是根据目前的法律的话，就是这个额度实际上在2026年的时候会降低，降低到什么程度呢？就是大概一个人560万和夫妻双方是1120万。所以对于我们湾区很多家庭来讲的话，可能这个金额是不够的。那许多人就会想说，那现在因为新的这个 Trump 政府会不会说延续我们现在高的遗产税的免税额1360万到2026年之后呢？或者说是这个遗产税的免税额会不会降低呢？就是一直是有这个探讨，但是目前呢，我们是不知道会发生什么，就这个还是说一个我们叫 speculation，就是大家都有很多的想法，但是没有任何的法律的依据。但是根据目前的法律的话，就是遗产税的免税额到2026年是会降低，就基本上是折半，降低到那个现在的额度的一半。那如果说你超过遗产税的免税额的资产，这部分资产的话，会有40%的遗产税。就是你比如说举一个例子，今年的话，你一个人你有20个 million 的资产，2000万，然后假设说你去世了，你有1360万，就我们就说1300万吧，1300万的话是不用计入遗产税，但是去除1300万以后，剩下700万，700万的话大概有 roughly 这个 calculation 的话，就是这个40%280万是有遗产税，就需要缴遗产税，就大概是这样的一个概念啊。这个是联邦，sorry 是联邦的遗产税。那不同的州呢也会有遗产税的规定。 fortunately，在加州我们是没有遗产税的，没有州的遗产税。但是如果说你住在其他的有的一些州，比如说我们的邻居俄勒冈州，然后再往上的华盛顿州，像我们有很多客户都会考虑在华盛顿州，比如说买个房子啦，置业一下呀。那你就要注意了，这两个州是有遗产税的。而且华盛顿州就 Washington State，它本身的州的遗产税是非常难去 planning，它的门槛也很低，大概200多万所以遗产税的 planning 在这些州来讲也是一个重点了所以如果说你是有相当的资产，然后可能有遗产税的问题的话，那及早的去做一些布局和规划，这个是非常非常重要的。嗯，那个 Michael，do you have anything to add for this one?
Well, just a little bit. So the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act for us, for estate planning attorneys, this is a big thing because of the essential doubling of the estate tax exemption. So a great, gift to estate planners and their clients. And the projection is based on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was ending this coming year, December 31st, 2025. So there's a lot of planning here. And right now, just as we have up on the slide, what's going to happen? Well, as the law is now, that is passed by Congress, proposed, proposed in the House, passed by the Senate, or proposed to the House, it has to pass the House and the Senate, and then be signed by the president. That law still exists. So as of today, December 31st, 2025, that's still the law. Sunset is still going to happen. But we had an election, and elections have consequences, and the presidency is R Republican, Senate is R Republican, House is R slightly. It's going to be a really, really tight margin, actually, January 20th. So what it looks like is there's a Republican leading government right now. There may be changes in the Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act regarding the estate tax, but not just that. So like a lot of clients, they say, yeah, Mike, I'm not really up to those levels of wealth. What do I care about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? Do you live in California? Yeah. Do you have state taxes over $10,000? I think, yeah, my property tax, income tax, yeah, both of those over $10,000. Then you care about what's going to happen, because one of the other things that's going to happen that's scheduled under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the SALT cap, tax people call it, SALT, SALT, which is state and local taxation. That's what we abbreviate it as. The state and local taxation cap, the deduction is $10,000. That's also scheduled to expire December 31st, 2025. So as in 2026, we'd be able to take the deduction before, like we did before 2017. So there are parts of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that maybe we want to get extended, like this estate tax thing. But then there's some things that we wouldn't really mind as Californians having it expire. So really, it is something to watch. As planners in the so tax people world, there's a Bloomberg tax, Lexus tax center, all of these different things, and we all have these charts up with the RSS feed. Nothing's on there yet because the government, the next administration doesn't take office until January 20th. So we expect probably in about February we'll be getting a lot of news. So February when we start having our webinars, but we'll start seeing it actually probably in our January webinar, because they will start to trot out what the plan is. There'll be a lot happening here. So 2025, busy year. Keep so tabs on everything, because we thought that year was going to be 2024 this year. We got a little bit of a reprieve, 2025. We'll see what 2025 has in store.
Thank you, Michael. 那个现在时间我差不多了，因为我要赶另外一场讲座哈，所以我就把接下来的这个演讲交给 Michael 了，然后 Michael 会跟大家一起 share 一下关于我们高资产阶级人士他的 planning 的一些 意见和建议，然后以及年底税务一些规划、资产保全，还有一些慈善信托这方面。所以那个接下来我们就请 Michael 跟大家一起分享他的这方面的经验，然后我在这里就祝大家度过一个愉快的节日。OK，Happy Holidays。
不好意思，我的中文不这么好，所以我需要说英文，好不好？Okay. So one thing, everyone, I will have to proceed in English, but I hope that's no problem, and I'll round out our slides here
You'll be
this way.
great.
Yes, yes. Well, great pleasure to be here. So we'll see you again. So moving right along, some planning tips going forward and thinking about what to do for the next year. So here's some rough back of the envelope math that all planners are taking a look at. And it's essentially this blocking out clients, and we can tell you how we're doing it, and then you can kind of figure out where you fit in. So essentially, what we have is this is thinking about estate tax planning. If you are an individual and your asset level is below 7 million, or a couple and you're below 14 million, substantially below, you cushion for growth. If you're below that, focus on revocable living trust planning, your basic core estate plan. Make sure that's solid. Also, perhaps we'll see in a moment, taking a look at life insurance, trust planning, things like that. Focus energies in there. Potentially, you likely don't really have to be so worried about the estate tax right now, and maybe for 2025, we'll see what the 2025 law has. On the converse, if you are the family where individually you're at 13.6 million, or you're a married couple and you're 27 million, you say, we're over right now. We already have the problem. So even with the large exemption, my asset level hits that number right now. In that case, we should start talking really early, because at that situation, even if there are changes in the estate tax law, and I'll prognosticate, I'll make a guess in a little bit. Even if there are changes, you're going to have a problem no matter what, so to speak. Whether whatever they do, unless they abolish the estate tax, which I think is very, very, very unlikely, and I'll do some political guesswork, which lawyers probably shouldn't do, but I'll do, is unless that happens, the law is eventually going to apply to these families, these persons. So for you all, you'll want to start talking to professionals, estate planning attorneys like us, and start planning early. Use time in your favor. Just like interest, time favors the lender because it increases the compounding interest. The same way, time favors the giver, giving year over year over year, $18,000 per person, sometimes more in different situations. Doing this for a long period of time, it's better to start early. Third group of people is, what if I'm in between? I'm between 7 and 13, or I'm between 14 and 27. So I'm not the below the problem, I'm not the above the problem, I'm in here. Not high, I'm not low, I'm in the middle. For this group, it's similar to the larger states group, but essentially is be informed, keep yourself posted on this, keep attending everything that you can attend to make sure that you have your ears perked up to what's happening, because for you are actually in the most volatile situation. If the estate tax law is going to sunset, you're going to be 50% over, and that's a big problem. If the estate tax law is not going to sunset, it's made permanent, okay, no problem. We're still good. We can think about gifting and things like that, but it's not so urgent. So for this group, you'll want to be the most informed, because depending on what comes out of Washington, you may have no problem, or you may have a 50% of your assets are exposed to a 40% tax problem. So if you were like at 13 million even, you're in between, you're not quite over 13, but you're way over 7, you're in a fix in case there's a change in the law. So that's our rough blocking out of where everybody is. So let's go on to the next slide here. Oh, let's go back one. Actually, because this is the ILIT. I'd love to talk. We're going to jump into the ILIT right now, but this is a good slide, a better slide for my forecasting my magic on what I think Washington's going to do. Instinct, I think what at best may happen for taxpayers is that the sunset gets extended. What do we mean sunset extended? We say we'll have these high exemptions for another 4 years, but the sunset will happen in 4 years. I think that's probably the most favorable thing. There are some, every once in a while I kind of see some rogues out there that say, oh, the estate tax is going to be abolished. I doubt that will happen. Why? If you take a look at US government debt, we are in no way running a surplus. We are in a deficit. The government is spending quite a lot of money. Revenue has to be raised somewhere. And the estate tax does a reasonably good job at raising revenue. The other thing is we've had the estate tax in the tax code for a long, long time. So there's a long history of it. It's been administered for a fairly long time. Really since even the 1920s, we've had the estate tax in play in some form. So there's a long history of this tax. It would be unusual to suddenly abolish essentially 100 years old tax. The other thing is the raw politics of this, which is going to be, again, this is kind of an academic exercise, but when I teach it at the Santa Clara School of Law, it occupies a lot of time, is the politics of this tax law is not quite what it used to be based on the old election. There used to be that old idea of sort of, oh, the Democratic Party was more for labor unions and working class people, and then there were the country club Republicans, which was wealthy small business owners. That's not really what happened in the last election. So there's kind of a mixing around of the different groups, and there is some thought that the Trump group and the new administration is not super eager to give wealthy people a big tax break. If they're going to give a tax break, the one that was talked about on the campaign was exempting Social Security income, giving basically Social Security income now when one retires is covered under the income tax. You pay taxes on your Social Security income. That was very, very popular in the Trump and the Republican campaign. That's a very different group, the people who care about that than the people who care about the estate tax. You got to pay for one or the other. So there is some potential thought that the focus is going to be there, and there won't be a lot of focus on the estate tax. Why? Because if one's a politician, I need to do things to get votes. And not very many people who care about this is a big group of Americans that are going to vote for me. And also, the people who really, really care about this tend to cluster in California, Washington, New York, New Jersey, places that if I'm a Republican, I have no chance of winning. So why do I care to make those people happy? They're not going to vote for me. I want to make people, swing states, happy, from the Midwest, the upper Midway. I want Michigan, Pennsylvania, Minnesota. I want them to be happy. Arizona, Georgia. I need them happy. So up in the air. That's my guess about what's going to happen. Let's move on to our next thing, some strategies. So one of my favorite strategies for all walks of life, all levels of estate planning, is the irrevocable life insurance trust. And essentially what this is that this is the most accessible, most approachable, irrevocable trust. So we do, of course, all our revocable planning, our estate's all good. I say, I think I want to buy a solid, good, whole life, investment grade policy, protect, my family while I'm living, and my, family, thereafter. So what is a good way to do this? A good way to do this is to purchase a life insurance purchase the life insurance via an irrevocable trust. And so using this irrevocable trust, what's the difference is we set up the trust, we have a neutral trustee, and the insurance is bought by the life insurance trust. And that's neutral trustee. That neutral trust is the purchaser owner of the life insurance. And the policy premiums are funded by me annually gifting to the life insurance trust. Annually gift, annually gift. And because it's owned separately by a third party, and I do the annual tax-free gifting, if I pass away, it is not owned by me. The assets that I put into were appropriately accounted for gift tax, so we don't have any problem there. That asset, that policy that's $1 million or 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, that's outside of my estate, not subject to estate tax. And it is very easy to do, very easy to administer, very easy to employ and benefit from, and have it not be part of the taxable estate. Works great. The other thing that works great on the life insurance trust, because a lot of clients say, "Oh, Mike, that that all sounds good, but I'm only in that like $4 million zone, and I'm going to get a $1 million policy or $2 million policy. I don't care about the estate tax. What do I care about this? It's really not going to apply to me because at best I'll get to seven. What's the point to talk about this anymore?" The second point on the slide is the ILIT is also an asset protection vehicle, and a pretty good one, because this trust is set up, established irrevocable trust, before any problem happens, before any lawsuit happens, before there's any trouble. Create the ILIT, get the quality insurance. I fund it year over year. I can still borrow from the ILIT, but I don't own it. And none of the things that are transferred to it over the years are fraudulent transfers that would weaken asset protection. So let's see this in an example. A client that did this. I had a client business. The client owned an auto repair shop. They had an auto repair shop. It's a super risky business. And the client essentially said, this is kind of risky business. Someone can get hurt with this. I'm afraid, I'm going to get sued, but I want to save money, and I'm a little bit afraid to save money in something like, just like a brokerage account or just in cash, because there could be a lawsuit and the money could be taken away from me. The same way that I may have some concern about, it's a difficult job. Maybe I get injured. Maybe I need the life insurance. The life insurance trust is a great vehicle for this. I can set this up. I can set up the life insurance trust. I can fund it over time and essentially use it as my private secured bank. I can borrow from it when I need to, pay back the loan when I need to. I can do that. And then if anything happens, if there's a lawsuit, I'm sued, that's not owned by me. That's safe. So it can be a great asset protection vehicle. Here's an example that we have, some thoughts to think about of a husband and wife example where they have a residence at 4 million, investment properties. They have two of those at 5 million. So they're at 9 million. They've got the retirement accounts. So, 10, 11 million. So cash and securities, 12, 13 million. So they're at the top. They're at the top. So with this, they're essentially full up on their, at least one person's estate tax exemption. If, right now, if they're at 14 million, it's no problem because they each, we're actually at maybe at 23, 28% $1 million estate. So they're a wobbler. If the law is extended or made permanent, they're good. If the law expires and sunsets, then they're right at the edge. So should they consider purchasing their insurance policies as part of their estate plan, via, an ILIT? Yes, yes, because you would not want to purchase even $1 million policy just in your own name because you're this wobbler. You're potentially exposed to estate tax. Also, looking at these investments, should you consider purchasing life insurance? Likely, is because you have, you have $9 million in real estate, very, very illiquid. You actually only have 2 million in liquid assets. The retirement assets are highly restricted, and it actually comes with a fairly significant issue of who's going to pay the taxes when RMDs kick in, or if it's inherited by the next generation. There's a balance those retirement accounts have to be poured out over 10 years. There's an income tax that's going to be due there. So this is an example of a couple, and one can extrapolate with different numbers. Does insurance play a part? Yeah, it would make sense financially, but the ILIT is really critical to make sure it's not tax exposed. Let's keep going. So this is also apropos for what we're talking about for the end of the year, things to think about end of the year. Advantages of charitable giving, what to do for charitable giving. We are December 18th, things to think about or to remember. Make sure your traditional or Roth IRA, that has been fully funded for the year 2024. You have some time because it goes over to the next year before, April 15th thereabouts. But do the same thing if you have a 401k, you have matching, anything like that. Make sure you do that. The same way, if you have charitable gifting matching, many employers in Silicon Valley do a charitable gifting matching. So if I give $1,000, they'll give $1,000. That's 100% increase on your charitable gift. You can really help an organization if you are charitably inclined. And again, December 18th, you can still take the deduction in this year. So things to think about is make sure all of your retirement funding, all of those transfers have been done or planned out. And for charitable funding, there is a date on charitable funding because you can't roll this into the next year. This is calendar year charitable funding. You have to get it in before December 31st. Start taking a look at that. So the advantages of charitable giving is, of course, to reduce taxable income, in some situations, reduce capital gains tax, and reduce estate tax. It's no longer in your estate. So let's head on forward to our next slide here. So charitable giving tools. There is a wide range of charitable giving tools. The thing that I'm probably getting the most calls right now, and it's getting a little bit tight right now, is the Charitable Remainder Trust. So we'll go into in depth in that in a few moments, but let's introduce them just lightly. Donor advised fund. I love the donor advised fund for many situations. Why? It's simple. It's not troublesome. You open it up with a particular brokerage, you follow their rules, put things into the donor advised fund, and then you dole out to the charities that are recognized public charities that are on the list for the particular financial institution. Very, very simple and a good way for me if I say, well, I want to make a charitable gift of $20,000 or $25,000, but I don't want to give all of it to the Red Cross or XYZ organization this year. I want to dole it out over time, but I do want that negative $25,000 deduction this year. Donor advised fund looks good. Administrative costs low, easy to set up. I can achieve the objectives. The contrast all the way to the other side of our slide, private foundation. These are very, very good for the right situation. I have a lot of control. Essentially what this is I create a nonprofit corporation. I register with the IRS and the FTB to be a charitable organization that's classified as a private foundation. I can put assets into it, and then I can take a deduction based on what I put in, and I have substantial control, except I have to follow the 5% rule and make sure that I'm contributing 5% year over year to the other public charities. I have a lot of control. Eventually, in the future, I could even be employed by the private foundation. There's a lot of good stuff that can be done here, but it is administratively complex to an extent. It's a little time consuming. You have to do a little bit of work to get the benefits and the flexibility of the private foundation. So DAF, donor advised fund and private foundation. So two sides of the spectrum, from set it and forget it, I just button, to private foundation, I have to do a little bit of work, but I have lots and lots of options. We have both of those. One step over, we also have the qualified charitable distribution. This qualified charitable distribution, this is from retirement plans. If I'm in a situation where I'm having to take RMDs, I can direct my RMDs to the charity directly, And instead of, let's say, receiving the $10,000, donating the $10,000, and then only getting the deduction on partial, because I have to recognize the income of the 10,000, and I take the charitable deduction, which is not necessarily dollar for dollar, the qualified charitable distribution, if I'm retired and I'm receiving RMDs, I could basically just say, just send it to the Red Cross. Just send it to, don't send it to me, just send it to the Red Cross. And then I will not recognize income on that. That is something to chat with us if one is retired and one is receiving RMDs. It could be a tax strategy to lower taxes, but one has to be quite charitably minded. The other two charitable lead trusts, that one's to deal with income tax. But let me talk about the big one that is popular right now, Charitable Remainder Trust. So Charitable Remainder Trust, what is this for? And for end of year tax planning, we're a little tight, but it's coming up, is if there is a situation where two things. First is ideally if I want to sell something this year. Again, we're a little late in the year, but if I want to sell something, I say I have a highly concentrated position in stock, and well, look at the market today. That's so good. I don't have a good feeling about this. I want to sell this and liquidate that, and I want to diversify it broadly and take a stream of income. The charitable remainder trust can do this. Essentially, I pop up the box, charitable remainder trust. I put the assets in the stock with built-in capital gains, or free and clear real estate that was invested in real estate. I put that in there. The CRT sells it, and then if pre-calculated, it will then flow a stream of income back to me over a term of years, let's say 10 years. So I put something that's $1 million in. That was $1 million capital asset, sells it, $1 million cash. It's then reinvested into like S&P 500 fund, and then over 10 years it will flow back to me an annuity that's essentially about like 1/10 of what I put in, $100,000 per year. Usually we do the charitable remainder unit trust. It gives a percentage of the asset that's pre-calculated that flows back to us. So if the market goes up, we get more back. It goes down, we get less back. Good strategy because it defers taxes, and it can avoid the net investment tax, the 3.8% capital gains tax. So if I was selling the $1 million of stock, I pay 20% capital gains, but then for the remaining $800,000, I have to pay 3.8 net investment tax. So that's bad. I pay, if I sell in year one, I have to pay 3.8% more. Charitable remainder trust, I pay as the funds are drawn out, as they flow out to me. In that example, $100,000 over 10 years, I'll be receiving less than probably $100,000, but certainly less than $200,000 per year. So over the life of the CRT, I will have saved at base 3.8%. In addition, because I'll flow out, of course, in year one, the $900,000, but going forward, that $900,000 will stay there, and it will go from 9, 8, 7, 6 on and on. The remainder of the trust will grow, presumably, if well invested, will grow, and thus I'll be able to enjoy the investment growth of this asset and share in that growth. Also, because this is a charitable remainder trust, it does have to, by actuarial calculations, drop 10% at least of the initial amount paid into the trust to the charity. I will get a charitable deduction, usually between 8 and 12 to 14%. It varies. Calculations can make it lower or broader depending on the situation. But I get this charitable deduction, so it can be nice for some end of the year planning if there is an asset that one wanted to sell, or there is a one-off tax event that happened this year that I got some distribution from somewhere and say, I have a lot of income here. I need something to offset this income because I have a big plus sign here. I need a little bit of a minus sign to kind of balance this out. Charitable remainder trust, where it generates the charitable tax deduction by selling a capital asset. This could be a good strategy for some persons. So CRT is a good tool, and I recommend, even for everyone, related this year. So that it doesn't really applicable, not applicable to me this year. Keep an eye on this because the CRT can be very, very useful if you ever have an asset, stock, cash, etc., that you look at and say, I'd really like to sell this, but I can't because of the tax consequences, all of those things. So keep in mind the CRT. Some people are trying to rush it in this year. There's still a little bit of time. It's a little bit tight, but still potentially possible. But keep the tool available because when it's useful, it works really, really well. So let's move on. I think we may be at the end of our slides today. So, charitable giving. This is just a little bit of thought about charitable giving. If you go to example 2, example 2 is a good example of the CRT in action. Client would like to sell, Nvidia stock. Every year there's a hot company and wants to sell these stocks. We have a delta of $4.5 million. What should we do in this situation? This is a common CRT example of I have a lot of the stock. It's highly concentrated. I don't like that it's in one stock symbol, but if I drop sold it and try to diversify it, I have tax of $4.5 million. But at the same time, I don't feel comfortable with just letting it be. If it was real estate, if it was just land or a house, they'd say, well, yeah, okay, I can just leave it there. Where's the land going to go? It's not a cliff in San Diego. It's not going to fall into the ocean. It'll still be there. I'll let it go. But, tech company stock, I don't know. It's very volatile. Something could happen. I'd rather diversify. CRT provides a good way to diversify. Example 1, giving the $10,000 per year to each child's school. Should they consider a charitable gifting tool? Potentially. Potentially thinking, in the right circumstances, if it qualifies, a donor advised fund, or sometimes even private family foundation, if I want to place the funds in over the year, perhaps substantial funds, place $50,000 in. Of course, the $50,000 can be prudently invested by the private family foundation, and of course, the donor advised fund, and then I will gain, tax-free appreciation, and then that can be gifted, so I can stretch my money. I can get a little bit farther. So, some examples of charitable gifting tools. So great. Moving right along. Let's skip this one. This one. Well, we'll just lightly introduce this about $1 million of income in 2024, business growing and expect their income will increase year over year. Should they consider setting up a private family foundation? Yeah. If you have $1 million in income year over year, if you're in an extremely high tax bracket and you have a business or stream of income that you think is going to be consistent and growing, you need something to you're going to have to pay somebody. And right now, what you're paying is the IRS and the FTB. So, do and most people are you at a level where you want to direct the funds that you're going to have to pay anyway to a direction that you care about, to an organization that you care about? Most people say ubiquitously, almost all people say yes. And the tools are thinking of often private family foundation. And people say, well, why not a donor advised fund? Often, yes, donor advised fund may come into play, but then it depends how much are we giving? Are we giving small amounts or are we giving significant amounts? Significant amounts, private family foundation tends to uh, 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 lead to greater flexibility in the future. Oh, great. So on to the next slide, which actually I think that wraps up our presentation.
谢谢 Michael 律师分享的信息。大家可以扫描报名参加一下下个月的讲座，是关于重组家庭的遗产继承方面的问题。我们会跟大家一起就是深入分析加州继承法的一些规定，比如说未收养的继子女是否有继承权，如何通过遗产规划去避免家庭成员的纠纷。欢迎大家扫码报名下个月的讲座。讲座是在下个月的22号星期三晚上7点半。
And it looks like I got a question I'd be happy to answer. So A question came in, a written question came in. This is actually about premarital agreements. And can a premarital agreement change the nature of property after marriage? And yes, it can change the nature of change the nature of property after marriage. So if I do a premarital agreement, I can go a couple of ways. One way is I can have a more conservative premarital agreement where I say, well, I'm just going to confirm that my premarital assets remain separate property. The community property law already says this. The community property law already says that it stays separate property. And I want to confirm that basically that's going to stay separate property and that my spouse is not going to, that's basically going to waive any kind of creative or aggressive lawyering to try to deem that to be somehow community property or tainted by community property. We're just going to agree that that's always, whatever was my premarital house or premarital stuff, that's going to be separate property. That's conservative one. The other way, which is a more aggressive premarital agreement, is they say, no spouse, no spouse, we are not forming a marital community. What I earn is mine, and what you earn is yours, and that is going to be that. And you're going to have yours, and I'm going to have mine. That is much more aggressive, and that is far more difficult and risky with a family court as to whether or not they will respect that or not. There can be a significant risk there. And then particularly with regard to spousal support, you can waive spousal support, but there can be some constitutional limits that it can't be an unconscionable waiver. And family courts really don't like waivers of spousal support. And I say the family law code is a little bit more antagonistic to breaking the community property system. We're a community property state. So if one wants to go that way, it is a much more aggressive style premarital agreement. Often community property agreements say, okay, premarital things, yours is yours, mine is mine. We're going to keep it that way. We're not going to have creative lawyering or aggressive lawyering to try to recharacterize that. It also can be used for something that we say, okay, I have a house from prior to marriage. My spouse doesn't have a house prior to marriage. We're going to live in my house. We're going to live there. We're going to pay the mortgage from maybe community property, and we're going to agree though that those payments convert to separate property. That's always going to be separate property, and that house, if we get divorced, that house is not going to be partly hers. Partly because in California, we have an interesting idea or an interesting law on this, is that if community property is used to purchase or improve a separate property asset, it's considered an investment in the asset. So if, over 20 years, my wife makes, or we make, community property payments for 20 years on a mortgage on a Silicon Valley house, under the family law, we don't add up the value of all of those payments and say, well, there you go, spouse. We don't even add up the value of all of those payments and say, all those payments plus interest, there you go, spouse. We actually say, what fraction of the house did that buy? That was an investment. Wife gets that fraction of the value of the house. So that is risky. That you can waive and you can address in a premarital agreement. So that's how those work. The sub question of this is, if a trust is established when you are single, do you still need a premarital agreement? On this, the answer is, if it's an irrevocable trust, probably not. It's irrevocable, but most people, unless one is fairly wealthy and did an irrevocable trust, most people, if I have a house, I have a stock account or something pre-marriage, maybe I will do a separate property revocable trust. That's good. That prevents commingling. It keeps the asset in line with our community property law that is separate property. That's very, very good. That's like, I'd say like 85% like perfect, 90% perfect. But there's still that risk of aggressive or creative lawyering that might try to get in there. I'd say 100% would be the separate property trust and the premarital agreement. That would be really, really safe. It's separate property trust, and then there's a premarital agreement. That can be good. You also can do post-marital agreements. If I couldn't make this more complicated, but you can also do a post-marital agreement. How would this work? So, also community property law, inheritances are separate property. Wife and I are doing fine. We're living. Da, 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 da. All of a sudden, Uncle Joe passes away, and I'm the heir. I didn't know. This happened. I didn't deal with this in my premarital agreement. I never knew it was going to happen. There's no way for us to even address this. We married a long time ago. I didn't really know that I was ever going to inherit anything from this person. Well, we could address it through a post-marital agreement and a separate property trust. Because maybe my wife and I say, we already have an estate plan. We have a great estate. We hired Mike Lee. That's why we have a great estate plan. We have a great estate plan. It's a couple's estate plan. But now I got this separate property trust. There is this separate property inheritance. I don't know if I really want to put that into here. Partly because if I die, I kind of want this to maybe get divided back to that half of the family, because I kind of don't feel it's 100% mine. Whatever the reasoning is, that you could combine with a separate property trust, post-marital, that's okay. And you could even combine it with a post-marital agreement where, my spouse says, I don't have anything to do with Uncle Joe. I never knew that guy. That's my husband's thing. Keep it over on his side. I don't want anything to do with it. He'll say, I don't want anything to do with it. So you can do that too. So if those things come up, it's best to take a look at it. It's a little bit complicated, but there are some solutions. So thank you all for staying a little bit late to answer the question. I see no other questions. So it's been great to see you all again. I look forward to seeing you all in the new year, in 2025. So I wish you all the happiest of holidays, Merry Christmas, and be well. Take care all.